The Dallas Cowboys made some big roster moves on Tuesday, including signing a certain All-Pro wide receiver. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And on today's show, we're talking about some roster moves the Cowboys made. Landon, you and I, we waited all offseason for the Cowboys to have any type of movement, any kind of roster movement to cover on this show, and nothing. Crickets. And then on the day that they need to start cutting some players, they go ahead and sign CeeDee Lamb to one of the biggest non-wide receiver or non-quarterback contracts in NFL history. What are your thoughts on the signing?
I mean, deadlines make deals, man. It's like this was probably, you and I were, it's funny, you and I were having a conversation about trying to plan and schedule things out for this week and when to record and trying to timing of everything. And you and I both targeted that, hey, it's got to be in the next 24 to 48 hours, right? Because this is right around the time when you can get a deal done, get CeeDee Lamb in while you have this extra week, right? And then the week after this, you have game week, right? So you don't want him going through a kind of a ramp up period during game week. So I think this was kind of the last day of getting a deal done in time for him to have, not a full week, but like 4 days basically to get in here, kind of ramp up his conditioning. I mean, I'm sure he's in incredible shape. I mean, he looks, just the videos we see, he's in incredible shape, but to get him to that next level, to get him ready for a game, that he's got a full 4 days, and then you get him, folded into the offense and start working for Cleveland the following week.
I have so many thoughts here. The first is I'm happy that it's done. I'm happy that it's done now. So at least he gets 2 full weeks of practice, probably more like a week. I think this is probably going to be a lot of conditioning, and then he's ready to go for the game plan next week. I'm glad it happened. The money part of it, it seemed like it was so obvious. I mean, we talked about it like the day Justin Jefferson signed. Justin Jefferson got $35 million a year. We felt like CeeDee was going to get something close to that number. I think on that show we predicted $34 million a year. And that's exactly what it came out to. So why was there such I understand why CeeDee wanted to wait, but why was there such a pause from the Cowboys or hesitancy from the Cowboys to do this deal when I think everybody knew what the numbers were going to be?
I think that the length of the contract was still up in the air until probably, the last week. And I think that's, there's been a lot of talk about the reporting of like, the numbers. And I think Jane Slater came out and kind of gave a summary of basically the negotiating and the numbers and everything. But I do think that the years are ultimately where the final kind of hurdle to get over, outside of all of, obviously, the Ayuk situation still not being settled and that kind of throwing some turmoil into this. But, look, I mean, this was a situation with Dak, the last contract, right? Is that Dak wanted a shorter deal than the Joneses wanted to offer because they like, and it's either or, right? It's like they want to have the option to either have a lower guaranteed amount or they want to have that extra year on the deal in order to kind of move things around for cap flexibility, right? That's just the way that the Joneses operate, for good or bad, right? And ultimately the problem is that these last few big name contracts, these agents haven't been willing to kind of play ball in that.
Well, it's not just the Cowboys. It seems like across the league, you're seeing a lot of these shorter deals because Justin Jefferson got a 4-year deal. I believe AJ Brown got a 3-year extension, so it's really like a 4-year deal. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown was the same. Jalen Waddle was the same. It seems like these agents are really pushing for, hey, we'll settle for a lower amount of money, right? Like, I'm not really a lower amount, 136, but in the past when the Cowboys would give out some of these big deals, whether it was
Yeah.
like to Zeke or Terrence Steele or even like Trayvon Diggs, and they would try to get it to 5 or 6 years, or the Tyron Smith deal like a decade ago, which was a 10-year deal, right? Like, I just think those days are over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the Cowboys aren't the only team that kind of operate in this manner. They may be the headlining team that operates in this manner, but they're not the only team that has been operating in this manner. And unfortunately for all the teams that have been operating like this, there clearly has been a concerted effort. And what I think it is that you're seeing more kind of even short term, but still like decent sized contract for 30-plus-year-old wide receivers. And so what it is that these guys are trying to get opportunities for third contracts, opportunity,
Yes.
say that they never got, that the guys in the generation beforehand never got, even though they were still in their prime, well into their 30s, because they signed these 6-year extensions or 5-year extensions after serving a 4 or 5-year rookie contract. So I think it's what it does is giving the agents the thought, hey, not only can my guy get an extra payday, but we can get an extra payday out of these careers if we can just shorten that initial first contract out of their rookie deals by a year or two.
And look at CeeDee Lamb. So he played 4 years already in the NFL.
Yeah.
He's got the 4-year extension plus this year, the 5th-year option. So Dallas has him under control for 5 more years, right? If he plays out this contract, I think he'll be 29 when he hits free agency or would be eligible to hit free agency. And if you just kind of project forward, let's say he continues to put up similar numbers and the wide receiver market continues to go up, could he be looking at 45 million a year, 47 million a year by the time he gets to that part of his contract? It's possible.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where the wide receiver market is at this point in 4 or 5 years, right? It feels like there is a crazy kind of hollowing out in a lot of ways of the wide receiver market. It's like you have these top end guys who are getting contracts that are just going up and up and up and up and up. And if you're an elite guy, you're going to get paid, and you're going to get paid a lot of money. But the middle class of the wide receiver core is kind of being hollowed out by the fact that all these talented wide receivers are coming out of college and they're ready to play in a way that didn't necessarily happen 10 or 15 years ago. So it is going to be interesting to see how that whole market continues to change, especially as the game may or may not kind of continue down. It was definitely a trend way towards passing. I'm wondering if we aren't starting to see that sort of come back around a little bit starting this year. I wonder if that is going to have an effect on the wide receiver market in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Last couple things on CeeDee Lamb. I'm really glad that they locked him up because for a million different reasons. He's one of your best players. He's been very durable, knock on wood. Man, I feel like I have to do this a lot after some of the latest jinxes I've had, right? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. And it seems like he does everything the right way. And you want to reward those players, right?
Yeah.
When you draft a guy in the first round and he becomes everything you would hope and more that he would be, right? When the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb at 17, I'm sure they thought he could be a Pro Bowl receiver. Did they think he could be an All-Pro receiver that put up the kind of numbers that we saw last year? I don't know. Those are the types of players you want to reward. It's a little frustrating that it had to drag out this long. It would have been better if he would have been in camp early in August. But ultimately, if he can stay healthy, there's no lower body, soft tissue injuries, I think everybody's going to forget about this by the time we get to week 2, week 3.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we've been saying for a while now, right? Is that and ultimately that's why, this is a story for the national media and for like a bunch of folks out there. But for Cowboys fans, it's more just like, when is this going to get done? We know it's going to get done.
We know what the number is. Let's get it done.
It's just like, I'd like to see him on the field. And ultimately, it got done when it had to get done, which is, kind of the way that these deals get done. I just want to throw in this too. I agree. I think that CeeDee not only deserves this, but this is a guy that, if you've been watching football or anything about high school recruiting or anything like that, this is a guy who has been highly regarded for his entire career since high school, early on in high school through college, and has never not delivered at any level, has always exceeded expectations despite expectations being high. Yeah, those are the guys you give a lot of money because guess what? They're going to continue to put up numbers in the way that you're not expecting, and you should be along for the ride for that.
Now that the Cowboys got the CeeDee Lamb deal, who is next to get a contract extension? We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We absolutely love FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel over the last couple months. It's still America's #1 sportsbook, but we got something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube base plan, you can watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I've been a Sunday Ticket subscriber for, I think it's been 18 years. I absolutely love it. I don't know what I would do living out of market, trying to watch Cowboy games. Sunday Ticket makes it so easy. It's absolutely phenomenal. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Go check out the week 1 lines. Go check out the future lines. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast, where I'm sure they're going to be telling you to draft CeeDee Lamb very, very high in your fantasy drafts. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, the Cowboys got this big deal out of the way. CeeDee Lamb, who was holding out from camp, they got him in. Who is the next player to get a deal?
You know, it's funny when you brought it up. We all hope that it's Dak, right? Like that it's the Dak that we get the announcement in the next couple of days. But the thing is that there really isn't very much about this contract other than the bandwidth of the people that were creating the contract that was kind of impeding anything in the Dak contract. Those are very separate track conversations. Dak already is on the already costs your salary cap a lot of money this year. So it's not like a situation where, okay, we lowered CD's number this season, so now we freed up some more money for Dak. Like, you're already paying Dak a bunch of money, so it's not like this is going to help. I think it will help with street free agents. Now, I think that's maybe where the answer starts to go to is that are there guys on the street that maybe the Cowboys were kind of holding back on? Or maybe, even more likely, are there trades potentially
maybe
that the Cowboys were thinking about making that they needed a little bit more cash to kind of be freed up in order to execute? And I think that that's maybe what we should be looking at. I mean, because I don't have the numbers in front of me. Do you know how much money this deal potentially could free up for the Cowboys under the cap this year?
I've seen some different numbers, but it's somewhere between 13 and 15 million.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's several decent vet free agents, or
if you want to go that route,
or a big time re-signing of a younger guy, or that you could spend that kind of cash on, or obviously you can keep your powder dry because you're going to have to be signing some more big contracts here in a little bit,
which is my guess.
That's definitely going to be part of this, I would imagine. But if you have a guy, a GM that's waiting on a call for a trade on a guy that's going to need a new contract or something like that, maybe that's what you could use some of this money. And maybe there is a chance, there is a world out there where they have those kind of deals in the works and they were waiting for this money to kind of be freed up in order to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah. So the obvious name, as you mentioned, is Dak. I think the odds of Dak signing an extension went up on Monday. Once you get CeeDee Lamb locked up, I think it's very comforting for Dak to know, hey, CeeDee Lamb's on a long-term deal here. That's really nice to have my #1 receiver locked to a deal. I think that helps. I don't think it's going to be Micah Parsons, not because the Cowboys don't want to sign Micah Parsons, but they just have so many more levers that they can pull, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
he's going into year 4. Next year will be the 5th-year option. Now, next year is where we get into some stuff like we did with CeeDee Lamb.
Mhm.
You also have the 2 franchise tags if you want to use that. My guess is next year is when the negotiations pick up. But if you look outside of the top 3, right, CeeDee Lamb, Dak, and Micah Parsons, there's some other names out there that the Cowboys could theoretically sign to long-term deals, and I've got some of them for you. The first one is Osa Odigizua.
Yeah.
We've talked about this one before. You look at the defensive tackles that come into the draft every year and how hard, like what the hit rate is on those guys in the top 50. It's really rough. You look at free agency, you're typically paying $7 to $8 million more per year on a defensive tackle than what you would expect to pay. I wouldn't mind seeing the Cowboys just lock up Osa now before he has, I think, a huge year in Zim's defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been a huge Osa fan since before they drafted him. I was thrilled when they drafted him, and I think he's performed, as I had hoped and more. So I think, yeah, if they can find the way to kind of, and this was one of the guys that I was concerned about, just because look at the they struggled to sign the guys that they have around him, but look at the guys they have around him. It's Micah Parsons, it's Dak Prescott,
Yep.
it's so it's a lot of big money names. And Osa is not going to be cheap,
No.
like a free agent, high quality pass rushing defensive tackle is pretty rare, and he's in pretty rarefied air as a pass rushing defensive tackle. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was going to mention Christian Wilkins, who was a former first-round pick, so he has that over Osa. But Christian Wilkins has never made a Pro Bowl. He has fewer sacks than what Osa Odigizua is, and he turned 28 in free agency. Okay. He signed a 4-year, $110 million contract with almost all of that guaranteed. Right. I think that's what you're looking at for Osa if he hits the open market next year, if not more.
Yeah, it's very, very possible. I mean, again, like you look at some of the pass rush win rates, metrics, and some of those things, like he's one of the very best pass rushers in the B gap in the NFL. So, I think if the Cowboys could find a deal, find a way to like get Osa on more of a sweetheart deal than what they've signed with these last few deals they signed, I think it makes a ton of sense, because and I'm hoping that, with this analytics department, they're nudging Stephen Jones pretty heavily, like, hey, look at what is happening at the defensive tackle market right now. It's exploding, and the value is trying to get these guys in early, or just hope that you can continue to hit in the draft, which is very risky. And as we've seen, it's pretty rare that these guys hit early. So you better have something in the hopper, and Mozzie Smith isn't enough of a pass rusher to be considered the guy in the hopper for Osa.
I'm going to give you one other name. Could the Cowboys convince Zach Martin to tack on another year of his deal? He's on the final year of his contract. Could they say, hey, Zach, let's give you one more year at whatever you're being paid right now, and these last 2 years, let's go out and have a strong end of your career?
That would be, I mean, I'm sure on board with that. And I guess the question now becomes, like, is Zach interested in playing beyond this year? Because if he is, then I think, ultimately you think there really isn't any place else that you would think he would play outside of the Colts, right? So maybe you say, hey, look, if you're still interested in playing, or if you're still feeling good at this point, let's do one more year, and let's run it back one more time and see if we can get a championship going for you.
Here's my guess as to what will happen. I don't think Micah gets a deal. I'm like 50-50 on Dak. I think they're going to roll over the money because obviously they want to pay Dak. They want to pay Micah. But you look at some of the other names that they have that are going to be eligible for contracts after this year. Deron Bland, Tyler Smith, Jake Ferguson. Like, I wonder if they're like, if we can't get these deals done, let's just roll over the money and give us some more options next year as we go into yet another wild offseason.
Yeah, I mean, look, I definitely think that that's the plan for a percentage of this at least, and maybe definitely more than half. But I am interested to see if maybe they didn't have something up their sleeve that they were waiting for just a little bit of extra cash to kind of free up. And so we'll see if anything moves in the next few days. You kind of know what happened.
All right, let's talk about some of the other roster moves the Cowboys made on Monday, including cutting a pretty high draft pick. We will discuss that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, we will be back on Wednesday breaking down all the Cowboys roster moves. Again, they have to have their roster finalized, kind of, by 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday afternoon. So we'll do a show breaking that all down. A couple of interesting players that were cut early on Monday. Junior Fajoku and Eric Scott. Those are two early day 3 picks. Eric Scott was somebody that the Cowboys traded. He was a future 5th round pick on top of their pick. And then Junior Fajoku was a 4th round pick. Pretty interesting to see the Cowboys give up on those two players this early.
Fajoku was, the definition of the sacrificial lamb to a previous coaching staff issue, and really, I mean, I don't want to be like this, but he earned that cutting. Like he really did not have a good training camp. He played poorly in the preseason. He just wasn't a fit for what's going on here.
And by the way, I don't think, and I could be wrong, I'm not sure that's somebody the Cowboys are interested in bringing back, like on the practice squad either.
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, I did a 53-man roster yesterday that included practice squad guys. I never even considered. I mean, I was turning guys away, and I certainly never considered Fajoku on there. So, and Eric Scott is a guy who I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up back on the practice squad.
That one I agree with you. Yes.
But we'll see. I would not be shocked if he's like I tweeted earlier, shopping for homes in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area right now. So we'll see.
Wouldn't be surprised. A couple other ones. Tyron Billy Johnson had a fantastic training camp. Didn't always show up in the preseason games, but I just didn't. I don't know if there was a spot on this roster for him, despite having a really good camp.
I wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy that they plan to keep around on the practice squad.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Because he's a vested guy, right? So he's 28 years old. He's bounced around a little bit. So, I think, or I'm pretty sure he's a vested guy. I could be wrong. Maybe he may not be vested because he may not have accrued a year yet. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. So either way, he's a guy he's a veteran that I think can come back and he's eligible for the practice squad. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up back on there and you were calling him up to the roster, or maybe even like you keep him on the practice squad. And then if there's an injury, you bring him up to the full-time 53-man roster. So the new rules of the practice squad really allow you to do a lot of like calling up game day rosters. So don't forget that stuff.
I need to correct something really quickly. Junior Fajoku was waived injured. So which means if he's not claimed by another team, he reverts to the Cowboys IR.
I don't remember him being injured. Do you? I don't remember them being even announcing, like even doing the fake, he stubbed his toe injury announcement. So that's always funny when they do that.
Yeah. So
now they're not even bothering mentioning it to us at this point, right?
My guess is that they'll have some kind of injury settlement with him and they'll cut him off the injured reserve. Like I just don't see him. I don't see the Cowboys stashing him for a year and hoping things turn around in year 3. Like I
haven't seen anything from him.
No,
that's the problem. Almost zero positive reps. I mean, I think he had a couple early on, but I mean, it's been really, really bad for him. And I hate to call him out like that, but he had one of the worst camps for guys that had high any expectation, right? That wasn't just a tryout guy.
A couple other ones I wanted to mention. David Durden, who the Cowboys signed as an undrafted free agent last year, tore his ACL in training camp. He just wasn't quite there this year. He's been waived injured. Darrell Johnson, a defensive end from Liberty, was waived injured as well. Here are some of their other releases that I wanted to mention. Willie Harvey, who was their UFL linebacker, made some nice plays. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on the practice squad. Deontay Burnett, who they signed as a wide receiver, actually played pretty well in the preseason.
Yeah.
He did the job that the Cowboys needed him to be. Like, just be a competent receiver for Trey Lance in the preseason games. Nathaniel Pete was their only running back that they signed in undrafted free agency. He's gone. Albert Huggins.
He got like 5 carries in the whole preseason. I'm so mad about that whole situation. They gave no chance. Anyway,
no chance. I mean, but my guess is they saw in camp what they needed to see. Albert Huggins, a defensive tackle from Clemson, who probably most famously known for pushing a Rams coach. There were some people that thought he could make the 53-man roster. I didn't see it. Maybe he's a practice squad guy later.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility he makes it back on the I mean, they didn't cut him right after that, so obviously they had some kind of interest in him. And maybe they were just so desperate at defensive tackle at that point that they just couldn't afford to cut him. So who knows?
Damian Wilson, the veteran linebacker, also released. He was playing like late into the fourth quarter of these games. I'm still not quite sure why the Cowboys decided to re-sign him, but he was waived as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming that one of these veteran linebackers is going to end up on a practice squad call-up situation, either him or Virgil, right? Nick Virgil,
Yep.
or is it Vigil?
Nick Vigil.
Vigil. Yep. I wouldn't be shocked if either or both ends up back on the practice squad as a guy that they call up for their allotted 4 games and then release and then do it to the other guy, right? Just to kind of get coverage of the position.
We'll continue to monitor all these cuts. The Cowboys are going to make a handful of them on Tuesday. We'll break those down on Wednesday. Before we go, one of the things I always find fascinating are the players that end up getting traded during this week, because you'll have players that are drafted from previous regimes that will get moved, or some veterans that just didn't quite fit the current roster. I'm going to give you a couple of names. You just tell me yes or no. Samaje Perine, the Broncos are moving on. Interest there?
I think the problem is that it's more of the same of what you've got. So no.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's I kind of think he might be better than Zeke at this point.
Yeah,
but there's no sense of having both. There's no sense of having both.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Tim Patrick, another guy for the Broncos that they're moving on from.
I really like him, but I also really think I really like Jalen Brooks, so I think I have to see what it would cost. I'd say a soft maybe.
Okay. Tyree Wilson, the Raiders, who they drafted about 7th overall last year, a power defensive end that can kick inside a defensive tackle. New coaching staff, new front office. Doesn't seem like he's going to be on this roster.
Yeah, honestly, yes, because that seems like a no-brainer. Will McClay.
That seems like the type of guy that Zim might like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
A couple other ones: Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, both look like they're on their way out in Kansas City. Any interest there?
No, I mean, like maybe on a practice squad situation for one of them, but I certainly not Tony. I don't have any interest in that. Sky Moore, man, what happened, guys? Like
it's rough.
A lot of people really, really missed on Sky Moore, and including myself. So I don't know.
Last one. Izzy Abaconda, for the Jets.
Abaconda?
The Izzy running back from the Jets, who we really liked because of his athleticism. He's been buried on that Jets depth chart, especially after the drafting of Braylon Allen on day 3. It seems like he could potentially be moved for like a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yes, throw it at them. Go make it happen right now if that's what it costs. Yeah, I mean, look, this was a guy that I think. I mean, you and I talked about him, I've been talking about him from before the preseason, before training camp, even. And he had an I think he was PFF's highest rated running back in the preseason. So it's not like he had a bad preseason either. So I was telling you, I think last night that I was watching highlights of him at Pittsburgh, and while I was watching highlights, suddenly Tony Dorsett pops up on the sideline in his pit shirt and everything, and he was freaking out over one of his runs, and I'm like, man, that's a sign right there. Go get this kid. Yeah, absolutely. He's explosive. Yeah. He's exactly what the Cowboys need in the running back room.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, go check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. They do absolutely fantastic work over there. You don't even have to search for the podcast. It'll be linked in the description of this show. Check it out. I love the work that Vinny and Michelle do. One of the best fantasy podcasts out there. Go check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. You can check us out on YouTube as well. Follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.